At 50 years old, my life was marked by routine, a routine I shared with Raoul, my husband of the same age. The flame of passion and excitement that once united us had vanished, leaving behind a monotonous and predictable existence. After 25 years of marriage, each day we woke up at the same time, shared a silent breakfast, and immersed ourselves in our respective daily occupations. Most of the time, I ate lunch alone at home, sometimes opting to go out and enjoy a meal elsewhere. The evenings became even more boring, dinners lacked meaningful conversations, becoming more formalities than moments of connection. I thought about the moments we shared, the laughter, and the dreams we built together. Where had that complicity gone? When had our lives become this monotonous? The routine not only affected our relationship but also reflected in our home. The same furniture, the same walls, the same decoration that had surrounded us for decades. My name is Lucia. I am of average height with brown eyes. My routine involves keeping the house tidy, and I find a creative escape in crafts using recycled materials. Despite always being at home, I like to dress elegantly, take care of my hair, and paint my nails. Home comfort does not mean sacrificing style for me. Dressing elegantly is more than a choice of clothes, it is an expression of my self-love. And even though the outside world doesn't see my clothes, I feel it as a personal celebration. Raoul, my husband, is a man of robust build with gray hair that adds a touch of distinction to his dark hair. He dedicates most of his time to his office work. His presence at home is reduced to mornings and nights, the only moments when our lives coincide in the same space. He is more present by his absence than by his active participation in the moments we share together. A couple of weeks ago, the house pipes started giving us problems. First, the kitchen siphons, then the bathroom ones, and finally in the laundry area. In normal situations, Raoul, skilled with repairs, would take care of solving these setbacks. But this time, the urgency of the matter forced us to call a plumber. Diego, a 21-year-old young man, was in charge of fixing anything that was broken. With average height, slim build, light complexion, dark eyes, a defined jawline, and lips that often curved into a friendly smile, he wore the plumber's uniform. Sturdy blue pants and a white short-sleeved shirt. Diego's physique caught my attention, as we rarely received visits from unknown men at home. Our circle of visitors was limited to longtime friends with whom we shared dinners and some family gatherings on weekends. The days became intense with his constant presence at home, and as I observed how he handled the tools with skill, I began to feel a sense of vitality, something I hadn't experienced for a long time, immersed in the lack of intimacy in my marriage. My mind began to wander, to fantasize about the young man who was striving to bring normality back to our home. In those long hours when I was alone, I immersed myself in thoughts and fantasies that offered me an escape from the dull reality I shared with Raoul. One afternoon, while Diego was working, I decided to get closer to see his work up close and was impressed by his skill with the tools and his meticulousness in every detail. His hands moved skillfully, repairing everything that was broken. During a break, we struck up a casual conversation, and I discovered that Diego had a passion for plumbing and that, despite his young age, he had great skill in his trade. And from that moment on, I began to look for any excuse to exchange words with him. The next day, I decided to invite him to lunch. Unlike the routine dinners with my husband, the conversation with Diego flowed naturally. We explored dreams, passions, and life in general. At that moment, I rediscovered the spark that had been lost, and I realized that I craved the vitality and complicity that Diego was offering me. After lunch, I remained at the table, lost in my thoughts as the boy resumed his work. In an unexpected stumble, his clumsy movements resulted in an accidental bump on my buttocks, creating a moment of tension and surprise. Diego, visibly embarrassed by the incident, apologized quickly, explaining that it was a simple accident. I tried to downplay the misunderstanding and changed the subject to lighten the mood and resume the connection we had experienced during lunch. Throughout the afternoon, I tried to overcome the awkward moment, but I felt that the dynamic between us had subtly changed. Diego, for his part, also seemed more reserved, as if the misunderstanding had created a barrier between us. I decided to make an effort to restore the naturalness that we had achieved before the incident. During a break in his work, I proposed that we have a coffee and go out to the garden. I wanted to clear the atmosphere and recover the fluidity in our conversation. As we sipped our cups of coffee, I noticed how the young plumber gradually began to relax. Reciprocally, I felt that I was also leaving behind the discomfort of the moment. And instead of distancing ourselves, we were getting even closer. That day, Raoul arrived home earlier than usual. The sound of the keys in the door resonated through the house, and although Diego quickly resumed his work, the knowing glance between us betrayed what had happened. In a short time, the plumber announced that his workday was over and that he would continue the next day. That night, I could barely sleep. The excitement generated by what had happened contrasted directly with the guilt that enveloped me. On the one hand, part of me felt alive, exhilarated by the spark that had arisen with Diego. However, guilt gripped my thoughts, reminding me of my commitment to Raoul, my lifelong partner, oblivious to what was happening in his own home. Diego would return to the house, and this certainty added an additional layer of tension to my emotions. With the arrival of the new day, we shared breakfast as usual with Raoul. About an hour after he left for work, the doorbell rang, indicating Diego's arrival. This unusual break in the daily routine that had characterized my last years provoked a mix of emotions. As I descended the stairs to receive him, anxiety manifested strongly. My heart was pounding fast, and my breathing became agitated. Diego waited at the door with a warm smile. His greeting was kind, and once inside, he began to share details about his workday with me. Every gesture, every word, was like a magnet that drew me towards him. That day, we had lunch together again. As we ate, he gently took my hand to thank me. The brush of his fingers on mine generated a tremor that ran through my entire body, momentarily paralyzing me with the intensity of the contact. After we finished eating, Diego continued with his work, and I, restless, began to tidy up the house. When I went to the kitchen, he approached again, took my hand and said, "You can use the dishwasher now." My nervousness increased, but his hand remained on mine for several seconds until our eyes met. From there, words were scarce. The language of our bodies spoke clearly, and the connection between us manifested itself through subtle gestures. Diego and I surrendered to the moment, and with a serene expression, he slowly approached. Our heads tilted and our lips were inches apart. The kiss, initially soft, was the confirmation of the connection that had gestated over the course of the days. He began to gently caress my hair and my head, giving me delicate kisses on my hands. Each gesture of his was a caress that awakened deep sensations within me, and in those moments I let myself be enveloped by the pleasure, happy to feel the tingling in my body again. We continued to caress each other gently, just feeling the brush of our hands, until the sound of keys resonated. It was my husband. We chose to act naturally. Diego continued working while I prepared a coffee. My nervousness grew. It was the first time I had done something like that to Raoul, an act that intensified the contradiction between reality and my hidden desires. That kiss marked the beginning of a double life for me, one in which I tried to keep up appearances in front of Raoul while secretly exploring a new reality full of emotions and passions with Diego. As the days passed, our clandestine relationship deepened further, using as an excuse the extension of repairs at home. However, guilt became a shadow that accompanied me, but the attraction and excitement that Diego awakened in me seemed to momentarily overshadow it. My relationship with Raoul continued its course, seemingly normal. We crossed paths in the daily routine, shared the table and the bed, but the emotional distance between us grew. The nights we spent together were quieter than ever, while my mind wandered between the love we once shared and the passion I now lived in secret. The secret was becoming increasingly difficult to keep, and the tension manifested itself in small details, even in my constant smile. The duality of my life was becoming a dangerous game where every false step could reveal the truth. As the days went by, Raoul began to notice the changes in my behavior. Subtle questions about my day and gestures of concern revealed his intuition, but I tried hard to conceal, to hide the reality. The relationship with Diego also became more complicated. The moments of ecstasy shared in secret clashed with the responsibility and commitment I had to my husband. The contradiction settled within me and the struggle between morality and passion intensified. One particularly tense afternoon, Raoul raised his suspicions directly. My evasions were no longer enough, and faced with the confrontation, I had to invent a story to justify the changes in my attitude. Raoul, confused, accepted my explanations. The double life I was leading began to weigh on my conscience. The guilt became unbearable and the feeling of being trapped between two worlds became suffocating. It was one morning when Diego arrived at home and unexpectedly greeted me with a kiss on the mouth. Surprised, I returned the gesture just as I realized that Raoul was behind Diego, observing the scene with surprise and bewilderment. The three of us remained in an awkward silence as Raoul and Diego's gazes crossed in a tense exchange of expressions. The reality of my double life was exposed, and the weight of the truth was reflected in Raoul's face, who broke the silence with a look of disbelief and pain. Words seemed to get stuck in his throat, unable to come out. Diego, on the other hand, showed a gesture of regret and surprise, perhaps not anticipating the consequences. I tried to articulate an explanation, but the words faded before leaving my mouth. The air became thick and tears streamed down my cheeks uncontrollably. Raoul, with his gaze lost on the floor, processed the scene he had just witnessed. Diego, on the other hand, chose to leave. My husband entered the house and sat on the sofa, immersed in an overwhelming silence that was only broken by the distant murmur of the television. I approached and sat next to him, facing the weight of the situation. We began to talk about the exhausting cycle we were trapped in, an endless wheel of silent breakfasts, the absence of shared moments, and the lack of meaningful conversations that had defined our monotonous routine. And we came to the conclusion that the best thing for both of us was to separate. The decision hung in the air, but there was a silent resignation, a kind of relief at the possibility of freeing ourselves from the prison of routine and exploring new horizons separately. From that day on, my life was transformed. The separation from Raoul was not easy, but it was necessary for both of us. I began to rebuild my existence, trying to find meaning in the newfound freedom. Although the guilt for the way my secrets were revealed was still present, I made an effort to focus on the present and the opportunity to live a more authentic life. Diego, on the other hand, had disappeared from my life after the incident. The complicity we shared in those intense days vanished, leaving room for reflection and acceptance of the consequences. Over time, I decided to explore my own identity and desires without depending on external relationships. Gone were impulsive decisions and overflowing emotions. I searched within myself for the spark that I had lost so many years ago, before routine took over my life. As time passed, the lessons learned became clearer. And I discovered the importance of communication, the need to keep the flame alive in a relationship, and how routine can become a silent enemy. I learned that passion can rise from the ashes, but also that impulsive decisions can lead to unexpected consequences. The path to self-acceptance and the pursuit of one's own happiness was not easy, but it allowed me to grow in ways I never imagined. I rebuilt my home, both physically and emotionally, and found new ways to enjoy life. My days were no longer marked by monotony but by exploring my own interests and connecting with those who truly shared my values. Raoul, for his part, moved to a new house after the separation. He found a group of friends with similar interests and began to participate in social activities that were previously unknown to him. The experience of separation also taught him the vital importance of communication in relationships, a lesson he had overlooked in our marriage. The memories, both of the shared moments and the painful separation, have been inevitable. However, it has given us the opportunity to grow and rediscover ourselves. Thank you for listening to this exciting story. If you want to continue enjoying and exploring other exciting stories, I invite you to subscribe to the channel. Join our community to not miss a single video. Click the subscribe button to receive updates on our upcoming stories. We'll wait for you in our next video.